Is it possible that the ink in a cartridge would write different from a bottle? I've been sucking out Jerbon Perle Noire ink from cartridges and storing it in sample bottles. I just received a 30 ml bottle from you and it seems like it writes different in my E95S. Pilot E95S. I'm assuming the reason you're sucking it out of cartridges is because you want to use it in a pen that doesn't take that cartridge. Personally, I think if you're using a lot of cartridges, just for the ink, you're paying too much. You're paying like 4 times the price that you would in a bottle, maybe even more, depending on the cartridge. So the Jerbon Perle Noire that you're using is a standard international cartridge, and you're trying to use it in a pilot, it's a different type of thing. So I can understand if you're decanting it for that reason. But generally speaking, it does not make economic sense for you to suck the ink out of a cartridge and use it in a conventional way. So, you know, and like as you would with a bottle filling ink. But that said, my experience has been with cartridges, generally it's consistent. You know, it's the same ink that they're putting in both. I've seen in rare circumstances where, you know, there's basically, I don't know if this is true for all pens, but I know that at least standard international cartridges, there's like Slovenia is like the place where cartridges are done. Like, I don't know if, again, I don't know if every manufacturer uses, you know, the ink cartridge folks in Slovenia. I don't even know like what company or who it is or anything like that, but I've heard enough to know that Slovenia is like the ink cartridge producing capital of the world. Who knew, right? So that's just, they got the process down, they do it well. It doesn't make sense economically probably for anybody to do it anywhere else. That's just like the place. So I think a lot of manufacturers send their ink there and then it gets put into the cartridges and then that's how it gets done. I don't know if that's the process for like Pilot and Lamy and all these other things. I just know, you know, very little bit. So I may be speaking outside my wheelhouse right here. Full disclaimers, not trying to speak on any individual manufacturer's behalf. I just heard enough to know that that is really kind of a central place where things get done for cartridges specifically, not bottles. Bottles are a whole different story, but cartridges, they've got the process down there. Again, it's standard international, so standardizing it internationally makes sense, right? For economic sake. So that said, it's my impression, my understanding that the ink is the same in all of them. I think in rare cases that could be maybe slightly different, but I don't know for sure that that is the case, especially with Jerbon. I do not believe that's the case. It's my understanding that it's the same ink. I think what could be happening here, you know, these cartridges, I've seen them when they sit there over time for a very long time. I'm talking like a couple of years. You can have some evaporation that happens. Even though it's sealed up, you know, you get some leaching that can happen through, there's a name for this process, I meant to look it up, and I forgot it, but the process of moisture wicking through plastic. And the plastic that's used in ink cartridges is a disposable plastic. It's that, you know, the cartridges are not meant to be stored for years and years and years and years. They're meant to be used and then thrown away. So it's not as impermeable a plastic as some of the other things, like specifically some of the ink manufacturers that put their ink in plastic bottles. It's a different type of plastic that's used there than there are in the disposable cartridges. So over a couple of years, there could be more leaching in cartridge form than there would be in bottle form, especially if it's glass. You're not going to get that with glass, but even in plastic bottles, it's not going to be as much an issue with ink in a plastic bottle versus a plastic cartridge. Does that make sense? So you can sometimes get that, and what happens is you'll get some of the moisture will evaporate, but the dye, the concentrated dye, is left in the cartridge. So you end up with a more concentrated version of the ink that writes a little drier, doesn't flow quite as smoothly as what you are dealing with in bottle form that maybe doesn't have that situation. So if you have cartridges that have been sitting around for a while, maybe there's been some leaching going on, and then you are used to using that, and then you switch to a bottle, the properties might seem a little different just because of the evaporation factor. So I think that may be a factor here, based on what you're saying. Other than that, I'm kind of mystified. I don't really know what would explain that, but I think that could be the case.